Hello and welcome back to the FEZ show. It is Thursday, the 14th of May, and we are still clutching at straws to talk about any news. There has literally not been much to talk about in motorsports until Vettel decided to leave F1 this week, or maybe F1 or Ferrari this week, however you want to put it. And that's all that everyone can talk about. So I think we just have to also join them. If you can't beat them, join them. And we might have to talk a little bit about the situation that is unfolding in front of our eyes in Formula One at the moment. So joining me to talk Formula E / Formula One is William Dodds and Jack Pickering. Morning, boys.
Good morning.
It's been in terms of Formula E, it has been a very slow week. There hasn't really been much. Again, they've stopped. Today should have been the Race at Home Challenge press conference, for example, but, again, not happening like last week. Didn't happen, so no news to get out from that. I have a feeling that they haven't done that simply because we've been repeating races, and because we're repeating races, I feel like there would be a lot of journalists sort of digging at them, us. Maybe they've heard us digging at them to find out what's going to happen, Jack, in terms of the rest of this Race at Home Challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've discussed the track choice quite a lot. We're going back to Hong Kong, but hopefully, as the season unfolds, we believe something's coming. But we've still got 5 more rounds of Race at Home Challenge left.
So obviously we'll get into more of that tomorrow in tomorrow's show as we preview the Hong Kong round. But it's just interesting that it was nice having these virtual press conferences, Will, just so we could find some stuff out and we could obviously continue the conversation. And, Formula E, give them their credit, were great. They did it for the test round, the first 2 rounds of the season. But for the 3rd and 4th round, we've gone to 2 places where we've already gone and they've decided, we're not going to do a press conference.
Yeah, it's a shame because it's been kind of slow news-wise for a while now. And obviously that's a good way to kind of generate stories and generate kind of interesting angles. I can kind of understand why, and I think, as you said, that's probably the case in that they don't want kind of people who haven't got much to talk about with regards to the track to kind of start digging into some issues maybe that they don't.
Yeah, definitely us. They've probably seen a clip of the FEZ show, and there you go. Like, no press conferences. This is what they're gonna ask. They've said what they're gonna ask. Let's just cut it. Go on, Jack.
I've just been checking Twitter because I saw a message in our own chat room on our Discord, and basically we have some breaking news. Basically, as we're filming this, it's been confirmed that Daniel Ricciardo will move to McLaren in Formula One for 2021, which means Carlos Sainz has left the team and will probably sign for Ferrari later today. So,
wow,
nice timestamp when we're recording this, but no,
good.
That's literally just come through this second. So I just wanted to put that out there so everyone in this call knows.
Right, so let's talk about it. Why on earth have Ferrari, Will, not gone with Daniel Ricciardo? Because, okay, fine, he's gone to McLaren, and McLaren are an up-and-coming team, and, McLaren have got the history. You'd expect them to move forward and continue moving forward as they are, to sort of catch up and become the McLaren that, people will remember in the early 2000s, the beginning of the 2010 era and in the history. But with Ricciardo on offer, surely he wanted that Ferrari seat.
Yeah, I imagine he did. And even if it is supposedly a kind of de facto, even potentially written into your contract kind of situation that you will be number 2, I think he will have a tinge of disappointment. Although, given that McLaren are going back to Mercedes, given the kind of interesting kind of technical appointments they've made with like Andreas Seidel and some of there has some others kind of within the kind of technical departments as well. I think that this is still a pretty good move for him. I think that he's probably the fastest driver on the grid that they could have realistically gone for. So I don't think Hamilton or Verstappen was an option really for them. And obviously they just got rid of Vettel. So I think if they kind of just wanted to go for the fastest driver available, I think it probably would have been Ricciardo. But I guess, he is slightly older than Sainz. And potentially they don't want to kind of create an atmosphere where kind of Leclerc thinks they're bringing in someone to challenge him. I think Sainz is still obviously a very good driver, but maybe they feel that he is more someone who would slip into that number 2 role. He's younger as well, so maybe they kind of think they can build this partnership over a long period of time. But it's an interesting one. I agree that if they want to go for the fastest driver on the grid, I think you go for Ricciardo. And if you want to go for kind of the best number 2 option, I think you go for Bottas. So it's an interesting one in going for Sainz, because I don't see he fits either of those 2 categories.
For me, it's interesting. A lot of people have been saying that, obviously, Ricciardo going to McLaren, I think it's a great move for McLaren. In McLaren as a whole, Jack, it's a fantastic move. Again, they've managed to build up a really marketable team in terms of Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz, which is, brilliant. Everyone wants to watch them two. Everyone wants to put them two together. Everyone wants to make challenges with those two. And I'm pretty sure now that it's the last year of those two together, there's going to be plenty more challenges if the season does restart, going on to and enjoying that friendship. But they're not losing any marketability, McLaren, by signing Ricciardo. And this is what we will talk about with Ferrari signing, Ricciardo. Their marketability would increase. People be more interested in Ferrari. Ricciardo's that kind of character people will get behind and maybe reveal some fun, a different side of Ferrari. Whereas I have a feeling with Norris and Ricciardo, that's going to be incredibly marketable. There's going to be lots of sponsors who will be interested in that team, and that could help them move forward drastically going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Daniel Ricciardo is one of the most popular drivers in Formula One right now, as is Lando Norris. So yeah, I think this could be a win for McLaren. I think I'm worried that because we've got the two big, I really don't want to say the word meme lords because it makes me sound about 12, but the two who are most social media content heavy, they in the team it might work really well. It might not work, but in terms of Carlos Sainz going to Ferrari, I agree with Will. I don't think it was the right choice. I think we saw last year that with Vettel and Leclerc that 1 and 2 that 1 and 2 works. Having 2 number 1s doesn't work right now for Ferrari, especially under Mattia Binotto. And so yeah, I think what should have happened is that they should have gone for tempted Bottas away from Mercedes, or they should have gone for they could have bought Sergio Perez's Aston Martin contract out. They could have done something like that. In the end, they didn't, and they went for Carlos Sainz. And so yeah, I'm not sure whether it will work, but we will just have to wait and see. Also, one thing that I do know about is that when Carlos is announced next year, it will be the first time that 2 drivers have the same name in different languages since Kvyat and Ricciardo a couple of years ago at Red Bull.
Oh wow!
Also,
But
Also, the McLaren one is first British-Australian partnership since Coulthard Webber.
Oh, okay, interesting. But what I was thinking in terms of Carlos Sainz, what a career this guy has had, right? Let's remind ourselves. Okay, was up against Max Verstappen in that Toro Rosso. Obviously lost out to Red Bull. Then gets dropped by Red Bull essentially. Then goes to Renault. Nearly finds himself out of Formula One. Then is picked up by McLaren and now is potentially a Ferrari driver wheel. Wow, the emotions of nearly possibly being out of Formula One to now being a Ferrari driver. And I know we're saying that he might be, a number 2, but he'll be out there to prove a point, especially to Red Bull, to say, look, you cut me. It should have been me in that seat rather than Pierre Gasly, for example.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you say about whether he's number 1 or, on equal footing, or he's number 2, going to Ferrari gives him the chance to win races, to get podiums, and to potentially even win a championship if kind of all things go really well at Ferrari. It's fun. It's an amazing story in a way to think, kind of coming off the back of a season at Renault when he's kind of lost out over a season to Nico Hülkenberg, and he's moving into a team in McLaren who've just kind of been one of the slowest cars on the grid in 2018. And it's a fantastic turnaround in it. And, that move to McLaren, which at the time could have been seen as a bit of a step backwards, going from Renault, who were at the time the kind of best of the rest, and a manufacturer team, it's an incredible turnaround. He obviously had a very good season last year. I think that kind of given the strength of the McLaren, that was kind of the minimum requirement for Sainz in kind of getting to be the best of the rest. Obviously, the situation with Gasly and Albon meant that he could kind of get up into sixth place. But I think, that sixth place was only a possibility because of the struggles in the second Red Bull seat and the fact that they switched halfway through the season. So he did a good job last season. I'm still not convinced he is kind of like top level in terms of speed. Like, he was obviously actually out qualified by Norris, and Norris had more Q3 appearances than him. He's obviously good in racecraft, but also another part of that is that he potentially didn't have to make as many overtakes last season as he might do at a Ferrari, because that McLaren was often kind of really at the front of the midfield, especially in the second half of the season. So I think he's a good driver, but I'm still not convinced he's kind of very top level, and it'd be interesting to see how he matches up with Leclerc.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see. Obviously, we've been one of the advantages of being in COVID-19 for us in terms of is seeing the likes of Leclerc, George Russell, Alexander Albon, Lando Norris, get on with each other as much as they have, and we've really seen the personality of them grow. It would be interesting to see, Carlos Sainz is sort of in that group slightly, especially with Lando Norris and so forth. So it would be really interesting to see if he's gonna, he's got a one of those play seat things that he can do the virtual GP in, Jack. So it'd be interesting to probably try and see a little bit more of him, and a little bit more of him and Leclerc now might be actually quite interesting to see how how they are together before, give us a little bit of a snapshot of what life could be like in Ferrari next year.
Yeah, definitely. Who knows? We might even see in the next virtual race maybe Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo in the Ferrari and McLaren, respectively. I doubt it because they're still under contract with their own teams. But no, I think it will be an interesting partnership. It could work, but actually, one thing that came to my mind was I'm going to say this now, and it's going to be on camera. So if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Carlos Sainz will win a world championship before Max Verstappen. That is what I'm gonna say. That is what I'm gonna say.
Oh, so you're gonna say then? So it won't be a number 2 situation, because obviously for Carlos Sainz to do that, he's actually got to hit the ground running with Leclerc.
I think Carlos maybe has to play the number 2 situation. However, I think it's going to be more like what we saw with like Kimi and Felipe about a decade ago when they raced for Ferrari, because they were very close to each other in each season, but one prevailed in 2007, which was Kimi, then one prevailed in 2008, which was Felipe. Felipe just missing out on the championship. But yeah,
an interesting thing about that is that I was actually going to reference the Massa and Raikkonen partnership, because obviously they actually both ended up helping each other out. Massa moved aside in Brazil to help Raikkonen, and without that, Raikkonen wouldn't have won the championship in 2007. And then Raikkonen did the same thing in China in 2008 to let Massa through, which kind of gave Massa that advantage to get a bit closer to Hamilton going into the finale. So yeah, that was an interesting partnership. I don't think that Sainz is quite going to be kind of as even as those two were with Leclerc. But yeah, it's definitely I think that's what they could have gone for with Ricciardo and Leclerc, having that kind of partnership. And they get through halfway through the season, they see whoever is the best at that point, then maybe they get the backing. I think that would have been the best way for them to go about it. But I think that's something Ricciardo would agree to as well.
Yeah, so let's go Formula E, because we don't think Vettel's going to come to Formula E. Yes, 2 Audi contracts are up, but as I said, I can't see Di Grassi, leaving Formula E or leaving Audi. I know Audi have had a horrible season, but he's done absolute wonders in that car. I'm looking at the FE driver market, and obviously drivers can come in from anywhere. That's the problem with F1. You're looking at a certain section of drivers, like who you'd think is going to progress or either move from one place to the other. Whereas in FE, you can pluck them from anywhere. So the driver market, in terms of predicting it or talking about it, is so much harder, Will. But I'm looking at the situation that we're in, and obviously we're in COVID-19, and I can't see much movement, unfortunately. I know we've been speculating, maybe moving Turvey up to Jaguar seat instead of Collado, and maybe some of the rookies like Neil Yarni, haven't performed, might be moving out and stepping aside because teams won't be able, if you can't cut it in your first season anymore, you're out. But obviously we've had unforeseen circumstances where a season hasn't probably been completed correctly. They haven't had as much time to prepare that they might get a second chance, and we might see the calendar driver market actually quite stay stable in Formula E.
Yeah, it is difficult, I think, because as we've mentioned before, the rookies haven't really probably had what you'd call a fair crack at it just yet. I think it's only like 6 races so far in the case of like Yanni and Hartley and Muller and Collado. So I think it would be unfair for any of them to lose their seat at this point. And as you say, I guess you've got kind of like the idea of like Felipe Massa and Losra, who are both quite old at this point. Maybe they're thinking of moving on. I imagine with Degrassi, the fact that Audi have kind of pulled out of DTM and kind of really said that they're going to focus on Formula E, maybe that it is going to be a boost, even though they've struggled this season. I think another interesting knock-on from the Formula One situation is what kind of happens with these kind of young driver programs. I think Ferrari promoting from externally is a bit of a kick in the teeth maybe for Giovinazzi, even though I don't think he's necessarily earned that seat. And in turn, you've got like Schwartzman and Mick Schumacher, who potentially thought that they could be getting a promotion out of this, but that might be less likely now. And it's a similar situation to see what Renault do. Will Renault pluck for kind of Lundgaard or Guan Yu Zhu to kind of fill that seat that's being left vacant by Ricciardo, or are they looking at trying to tempt Vettel? Are they bringing Hulkenberg back? What are they doing? So, maybe some of these young drivers who potentially thought that they were getting close to an F1 seat suddenly are thinking, maybe I'll go and consider Formula E. So I think there could be an interesting knock-on from just like the young driver programs here have basically been kind of told, like, we're going to hire externally. We're not going to kind of look from within. And maybe that could have an impact on Formula E, because you suddenly got like some kind of these really good, talented F2 drivers like Nick de Vries kind of style, who instead look to move over instead of kind of going into those reserve roles.
Yeah, Mick Schumacher at Porsche. Like, what's the odds on that? Just thinking, because as you said his name, like, if you're thinking he's part of the Ferrari, obviously, driver program, but German driver, German team, that could be interesting. It's, because it said, I think, the series is becoming so competitive, Jack, that if you are a rookie now and you aren't cutting it, I don't think you're going to get the time to develop. I don't think you have to come in, you have to do your job straight away now, because there's too much on the line.
Yeah, definitely. I think we will see a few changes at the end of season 6. I don't really see Neil Yarni sticking around for much longer. I think that I'm going to throw the name Nico Hulkenberg in there, because he
that's
won
a Porsche as well.
Because he won the 2015 Le Mans with Porsche. But the thing is, yeah, we just don't really know. But yeah, no, I think in terms of like drivers who may retire in the next coming years, I think Felipe Massa won't extend his state of Venturi. This season hasn't been good enough, and so he'll give it his final year on his contract, and then I don't think we'll see much more of him in Formula E after that, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I think there will be a few changes. Maybe not at the end of season 6 because of the weird season that we've had because of this pandemic, but definitely at the end of season 7 there will be quite a few big changes in Formula E, I think.
Yeah, I think Jack's right in saying, like, I think Collado and Yanni have kind of got a bit of respite for now, but if they don't kind of come out firing in season 7, I think that they're going to be in real threat of losing their seats for sure.
Yeah, let's think season 7, or because we're in a situation where we don't have that many races left, and when it could restart and so forth. So let's look at the calendar, and I think what's really going on in the world right now is Germany, and obviously the Bundesliga is starting up in this weekend. So I think Formula E will be looking at that massively, because it seems like if there's a country that's willing to open to racing at some point behind closed doors, within the next month or two, by late June, July, would be Germany at this point, Jack.
Yeah, yeah. As I've said from day dot, we'll go to Berlin, because it's relatively easy to set up. You don't need to close down any roads or anything. You just go to Tempelhof, map out the track, and then drive around it. But yeah, Berlin, I think was always going to be on the cards. I don't think it's going to be as close as like next month. I think they might hold out until because Formula E is such a community based and always brings out. I think they'll put it in. I genuinely think we'll go to Berlin in September, and then we'll have one final race in October. And as I've said since day dot, I still think it's going to be Valencia. I think it's just easier there. I think because that's where the Formula E cars are held right now. I think, yeah, just hold a race start of October there, hold a race end of September in Berlin, and then that's the season done in terms of what we necessarily need to do, and then start planning for season 7.
Yeah, because it's a good litmus test, this, Will, in terms of if it works with the Bundesliga, and if things go the way that it's supposed to go, which we're hoping that not many people pick up COVID-19, the cases still go down, and stuff like that. And obviously NASCAR is in America, that's sort of starting up this weekend as well. Obviously both of those are very domestic based competitions, whereas obviously Formula E is international. But if it goes well, then Formula E can say, hey, look, you're doing these sporting events. We're only a couple more hundred people. We can run a skeleton crew. We're in our own little environment in the Tempelhof airport, away from people. We're not closing down streets. We're in our own little bubble there. It could happen. It could happen maybe before September if, things go to plan.
Yeah, I think there are two elements to kind of the sporting events that are happening this weekend. So you've got Bundesliga and then NASCAR. I think the first element is just like they are, as you say, a litmus test to see if you can literally hold a sporting event without everyone getting it. And if they can kind of successfully hold a round of matches and, they're able to contain the disease, and if NASCAR is able to hold a race weekend and they're able to contain the disease, then I think that's an important kind of milestone in the sense that like we've got to a point where it is possible to have sports events. Obviously, the second part of that is the international travel element, which isn't the case in NASCAR or in Bundesliga. So that will be the next thing that kind of Formula E and all forms of international motorsport will have to kind of overcome. But I think this is an interesting kind of milestone to see if it is possible to hold a sporting event to kind of create this kind of biosphere, as Ross Brawn called it, and we can kind of go from there. Because if you can't even hold kind of like domestic football matches or domestic racing, then I think that means that any kind of international racing like Formula E is a long way off.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Like for me personally, I'm just in terms of going back racing, I want them, to go into airports, because that's the main issue. The main issue is airports. That's what I'm trying to get out. And you're going in, Jack, to so many people, and I think if you were to stay in Europe, which I think is really essential for Formula E to stay in Europe, you can at least drive from one place to the other. It might be a long drive, but at least you can contain your team members, your drivers, the team members that are going to the race, and you all drive together. You're not going to an airport where you can be contaminated by somebody else or some other person that's on the flight, and there's all these other factors. I think if they stay in Europe and they drive from Berlin to Spain or something like that, then at least they're keeping it within that biosphere. They're not going to an airport to then infect someone else. They're just driving the freight basically from one place, from point A to point B.
Yeah, definitely staying in Europe is the best option. I think, yeah, and driving from A to B, I think is perfect. I mean, like, yeah, yesterday in an alternate universe, I would have driven from my house in Oxford to Rotterdam, but in the end I didn't. So yeah, I think doing this like road trip from Berlin to Valencia, I mean, like, it wouldn't take that long to drive to. I think that's the best option to go for. I'd also like to point out it's just been announced Carlos Sainz is going to Ferrari. So
Okay, so we've covered it. We've
two
covered it.
2-year deal. So yeah,
2-year deal. Big news for them. Gotta be delighted. I'm delighted for Sainz. I think he's a great guy from just everything that we've seen. So, it changes the landscape of Formula One quite a bit, I think, and it makes 2021 a bit more juicy. And maybe we kind of just like scrap this season. Let's just think about 21 because then you've got all these new things to look forward to. But
we can speculate literally for 8 months.
Yeah, exactly. We can
actually just have like the thing is like these. We could go to tracks. We could have practice on a Friday for Formula One. This is not Formula. This is a Formula E show, by the way. But we talk about Formula One.
Wow.
But yeah, no, they could just have practice on the Friday. They could have qualifying Saturday morning, race Saturday afternoon, qualifying again Sunday morning, race Sunday afternoon, and just have races every 2 weeks from like when it's safe enough to go up until December. And so that way we cover the whole 13 race, whatever it is in Formula One.
Yeah, I think Formula One will obviously, finish off the season in some point or form. But as I said, it makes 2021 interesting. It's a shame really that the new regs won't come in for 2021 because it feels like a big change in driver lineup, big change in technical regulations, and everything will be handy going into that season. So just to sort of finish up, because I suppose the driver market in FE and is a tough one. The season again is Formula One, as we talk about Formula One today, will have the same problems about restarting. But I really believe that countries now that are starting, and I know Formula E wanted to go to South Korea, but I still think that's too risky in terms of the flights. Because you'd obviously have to fly everyone over, and there's the chance of contamination. Even though South Korea have started their football league, have obviously started Korean baseball as well, so they've got going on sporting events. So that's why Formula E are thinking, they've got started on sporting events behind closed doors, so we can go there. But we'd have to fly there, whereas obviously. And there's complications about that at the moment. That's why people are really worried about the aviation industry at this precise moment, because no one is really flying. It's just cargo stuff, which I suppose you could take cars in. I hope the cars don't catch coronavirus. But I suppose the last thing then to sort of wrap up the show in terms of Formula E is a lot of people have been speculating that this period of time is now the time where we decide to, scrap petrol cars, we need to go fully electric. And, being in London, the air quality has improved drastically. And, people have been taking photos of, different places from not just London, but from around the globe where you can see the air pollution on a normal day last year. You take a photo today and, the air pollution's not there because obviously there's basically much less cars on the road. There's much less need for air pollution at this precise moment. And people are really happy about life. And Sylvain Filippi, the managing director of Envision Virgin Racing, has come out, alongside of what Alejandro Agag and Jamie Regal said last week about, this could be the catalyst, and said this could be the moment that, car manufacturers go Will and say, we're going to move to electric vehicles and we're really going to focus on that uptake.
Yeah, I think that this situation is so kind of unprecedented and so kind of wide-ranging in its impact that it would be silly not to kind of reconsider a lot of the things that kind of we did before this came about. And I think that air travel and kind of car travel is a big part of that. And, I think that there's going to be a difficulty because I imagine that there's going to be a desperation to kind of get economies up and running very quickly. And that kind of desperation might even lead to kind of pollution kind of basically kind of rocketing that back up to what it was, because suddenly as soon as they can, everyone will get back on the plane, everyone will get back in their car, and it'll be in a kind of 6-month respite, but in the long run maybe not making much of an impact. So I think there needs to be a kind of concerted effort from governments, from organizations to really use this as a turning point and a point where we say that we don't want pollution anymore, we don't want kind of businesses to just continue to kind of pollute the planet, because we've seen a better way of doing things, but it's going to need a lot of cooperation for that to work.
Of course, like, that's the thing. So I'm hoping it's callous, because I remember ever since really starting Formula E, it's really upped my interest in having an electric car. And obviously I don't have an electric car at the moment, but the problem is that even now in 2020, like, the charging stations are still not really there. You know, and there's still a lot of limitations with electric vehicles, and I'd love, Jack, to have an electric vehicle. And I'm hoping that if governments, as Will says, do get together, do start acting, that, you know, the possibility of owning an electric car that we can take 400 miles down the road without needing to charge, you know, is quite close.
Hopefully it will be not far away. I mean, I can't afford an electric car to save my life, so I'm very happy keeping my 2004 Skoda Fabia. But I think that I think that what's happened is a step in the right direction. I find it quite hilarious, really, that someone eating a bat has done more good for the world and the environment than Swedish environmentalist Greta Thunberg. But well. I think it's I think hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll be a step in the right direction. I won't be able to afford an electric car for a while, but no, that's something that I definitely want to do. I think Formula E has really helped with that as well. I think it's pretty damn cool having an electric car. I think it's all I've done an electric car is done a 3-point turn in my driveway. That's it.
Oh, at least you've experienced it. Just the thing, it's just, I suppose it is interesting, but as I said, it's a bit like us. You know, people take advantage of situations, and now there are people out there that will take advantage of situations to benefitly. But, you know, you take advantage of, you do these chat shows every day. You know, we try and bring some good out of it, and you know, the air pollution has improved, Will, and you know, people want to take advantage of that, and people are saying, you know what, I want to continue this way. You know, I went out for a walk, and there's people saying, people in my family saying, you know, the air is so much cleaner than it's been before. Like, it's a proper eye opener for some people.
Yeah, I hope so. But as you kind of both referenced, the infrastructure and the cost is kind of still a prohibitive thing for a lot of people. So it will be, you know, and another thing you have to factor into this is that, like, a lot of people will have been affected financially by this situation as well. So it's easy to kind of say, you know, I hope this will be a catalyst, but there are a lot of kind of like things that need to fall in place. I really hope it's the case, and other than the fact that I'm kind of getting horrendous hay fever every time I go outside at the moment, I am enjoying the cleaner air, and you know, as someone who lives near a very, very kind of busy road that, you know, on any normal day is kind of congested all the way up, it has been really pleasant to actually be able to cross that road kind of whenever I want. So I think it's been a nice change of pace, but it does need the cost to come down. It does need to become more accessible. You need more charging points and everything. So yeah, I hope, but it will need government support and the support of organisations too.
Yeah, but hopefully, as I said, there's always good that comes out of bad situations, and hopefully one of the goods that come out of this bad and horrific situation is the sort of push towards climate change and maybe pushing electric vehicles to move up forward. So, boys, we're rapidly running out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Cheers, Jack.
Right.
Jack.
Tomorrow, I promise everyone, we will go back to Formula E, right? Formula 1's done now. It's over. Science is signed.
Yeah.
Ricardo signed. It's
very
over,
short
right? It's
2
done.
days.
So tomorrow we'll be talking about the Race at Home Challenge at Hong Kong. So we'll be previewing that event and talking news, potential DLC news. We've got some news coming up that we want to release in that show. So please join us tomorrow. Remember, we have a Discord link, so if you want to join the fun, join the chat about lots of motorsport. There's been so much Formula 1 chat in a Formula E chat room that we've probably ever would have imagined. So it doesn't have to be about Formula E. We've enjoyed talking about any motorsport, so if you want to come and join the fun, you use the Discord link below. Also, remember, hit that like button and subscribe button. It helps us out dramatically, if I can even speak English anymore. But thank you so much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.